Today we're going to talk about living with discipleship. Discipleship is such a big term and we don't always think of it with our children. But in the New Testament, when all of the Hebrews would follow a teacher, they were known to be his disciples, those who followed after a certain teacher. And our goal is to win our children's hearts so that they will want to follow after our teacher, Jesus. A few years ago, we were piled into the car. We had picnic basket, we had suitcases, we had the bicycles on the back of the car, we had a frisbee to throw, we had food galore, and the most important thing was we always listened to an exciting book on tape when we went up in the car. As we were going up to our traditional trip to the mountains, which was about 2.5 hours away, Clay had picked this great book. It's a biography on the life of a man named Brother Andrew. We were listening to the exciting stories of how this man lived through a Dutch war and things happened to him. He had a little pet monkey and then he became a believer and he started sharing Christ behind the Iron Curtain in all of these European countries. Well, it just happened that on the way up the mountains, we always stopped at this favorite little A&W, as an old-fashioned root beer stand where all of us would get root beer floats. And as we were going to this little town and Clay pulled up, he immediately turned the car off. And all of the kids at once said, Dad, you're not going to stop the radio there, are you? And they said, you can leave it on. Just go in and get our floats, Dad. It's such a great story. And he said, well, I don't want to miss out on what's happening. And it was just a typical habit that we had learned over the years, that discipleship is winning our children's hearts and giving them great people to emulate, great stories of how God has worked in history before, about how God uses very normal people to accomplish very great things. And this was an opportunity for us as a family to listen to a real life of faith, somebody who had changed the world. And then at night, before they went to bed that night, we could say, I wonder if God is going to use you to do great things. I wonder if God could use a little normal girl named Sarah Clarkson, or Joel Clarkson, or Nathan Clarkson, or Joy Clarkson. I wonder if God could use you like he did Brother Andrew to turn the world upside down, to take the light of his messages into people who had never heard about him before. You see, discipleship isn't indoctrinating your children, seeing that they know John 3:16 or that they get all of the awards at their scripture memory program. But discipleship is about the heart. Over 800 times in scripture, God talks about the heart. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart. He says, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And there are so many other verses. God searches to and fro throughout the whole world to strongly support those whose heart is completely his. And so when God looks at a person, and when God says, what is it that I really want you to do with your children? It's not about performance. But I don't think I really understood that at the beginning of when I was trying to attempt to disciple my children. I remember I went to a tea at this woman's home, and when I walked into her home, her children were perfectly dressed. And I even noticed as I was sitting there, I wonder who cuts their hair. Their hair is perfect. And my little boys always had cowlicks that stuck up. Her children said, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and thank you, please. And she had this impeccable house, and her children were very robotic in their behavior towards everyone. And as I sat there comparing myself to this perfect woman, I thought I felt very short of her standards, and I thought, I will never be able to have perfection like she is. But then I was reminded as I had my quiet time one morning and I was reading in scripture, and there was this boy named David. David was this singing, dancing, exciting person as you read through all the stories of his life. He was just a shepherd boy who lived out under the stars and saw the glory of God every night. He lived with animals. He had to take care of sheep. And it was in the midst of this, when he was out taking care of sheep, that he saw the seasons of nature. And he wrote poems about it. The heavens are declaring the glory of God. It was when he was taking care of his sheep and fending off all of the people, all of the bears and all of the lions, that he had a story about how he had learned to defend them, that he began to say, I guess this is what it's like for God to be my God. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He leads me in paths of righteousness. He leads me beside the still waters. So it was this very David who was out in the warp and woof of life, taking care of his sheep, watching God in nature, learning what it meant to take care of a flock of sheep so he could see how God was taking care of us, that was called out of this normal situation into the place where Goliath was. Goliath was a giant who had been taunting the armies of Israel. All of the greatest leaders of all of Israel had been coming out day after day after day to defeat this giant, but it made all of them shake in their boots. And yet when David came, he was just delivering cheese to his older brothers who were involved in the army. David came and saw the giant, and he said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine to taunt the armies of the living God? And it was at the point at which David said to the giant, you come to me with a javelin and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. David pictured all of the angels behind him, all of the warriors, Michael and Gabriel behind him. He said, I come to you in the name of God. There is no defeat for me. And so when we're telling our children these wonderful stories and we're talking to them about real life, their hearts are going to be reached. It's not about perfection. It's not about a formula. It's not about indoctrination. It's about giving them the heart of David. David was a little boy that God used to change the world. I wonder how God is going to use you to change the world. I was reading in Jeremiah, and God was very clear about what it meant to have a heart for his kingdom. God said through Jeremiah, let not the mighty man boast of his might. Let not the rich man boast of his riches. Let not the wise man boast of his wisdom. But let him who boasts boast of this, that he understands me, that I am the Lord who exercises loving kindness and justice and righteousness on the earth, for I delight in these things. And so as I came back to my own children, I realized that in discipleship, God wanted me not just to put verses in their mind, but to reach their heart, to give them a desire to love God and to serve God and to be themselves with a passion for how God could use their personality in their world.